The next scene is on a brownstone stoop. You have a few teenagers toking up, and it's a improvisational scene where they're talking about current events of the day. Uh, Talk a little bit about that. Then you get the redheaded character that turns out to be Benny, and then we get into another musical segment in the rock opera version.
Well, this is where the Jenny Eccles character comes in, and there was as I said, there was a real life red-haired girl who, when I lived on Stephen Street in Queens, it was a little bit north, towards the other on the other side of the street, and there would be people. In this days, there would be streakers occasionally. This would be on hot summer nights when most people didn't have air conditioning, so they'd be sitting out on their stoops. The older people would be sitting out on their stoops, usually with a glass of wine or maybe some beer. I remember my dad would walk up and down the block and stop off. There'd be people every fourth or fifth stoop. There'd be a group of 3 or 4 people out talking. Their windows would be open. Some people would be sitting at their windows talking out to people. And on the other side, there were the hippie kids. Danny is said to be between 5 and 8 at various scenes there, and the time frames, the different scenes are not necessarily chronological because Danny seems to go back and forth 6 months, a year, here or there. The Pastor Stagey scenes are chronological unto themselves, but seem to be in a different chronology than the rest of the play. But anyway, there was this beautiful red-haired girl, and I remember about 8, 10 years later, there was a Mountain Dew commercial with a red-haired girl that reminded me of this red-haired girl. And going back to True Life, I talk about the Merida character and the red-haired girl I liked in nursery school. And then there was the second Merida who ended up getting killed in real life and in the True Life. And so there have been a number of red-haired girls that have always been sort of like Charlie Brown,
Mm-hmm.
the red-haired girl that keep recurring. So this girl, I said, I don't remember her name, and much like I did with the black character, the former lover of Danny's in Exteriors, that I call Cassie Harrison and based on 4 or 5 other girls, and made her black, even though the real girl I had sex with in that scenario was white. I said, well, since I wanted to use the Holly song Jennifer Eccles, let me just call this girl Jenny Eccles, and in order to introduce that theme, I have to have this schlubby loser who she went out with on a date or two come, and he sings the song, that he loves Jennifer Eccles. And then instead of the good thing here, that the character's name is Marvin, and at the end of his singing the song, Marvin thinks that they're going to go out again, and Jenny's like, nah, I've gone out with this other guy, Bobby Pendergrass, or whatever I call him, and she doesn't have an interest in him. And so that's how the rock version ends with basically Jenny sort of pinching Danny's cheeks and calling him a cute kid.
As just tangentially, I know you've trumpeted the Hollies. Talk a little bit about them. I know you've said that they're at least as good as the Beatles.
Well, they were one of these bands that were like the Zombies, another group that I think is vastly underrated. They wrote these really great pop lyrics. They had these great harmonies. Their most famous song is actually a fairly depressing song. It's "He Ain't Heavy, He's My Brother," which is not really one of their better songs. But they had a lot of these upbeat pop songs, like Jennifer Eccles, like another one is long cool woman in a black dress, which is a really good song, but that's from the early 70s. On a Carousel, and a couple of others. And I just thought, if I'm going to have this girl, I got to give her an identity. Since I had already chosen to use Candy and Betty as characters, I wanted to have the main female character. Jenny Eccles is the main female character. She doesn't appear in all the scenes, but she appears in enough scenes that you can say she is the de facto female lead of the play. And she's different from Candy and Betty. She's not a prostitute. She's probably the same age, maybe a year or two younger. She's idealistic. She's a hippie girl. She would, if this is staged, she'd have to be dressed like a classic hippie with a bandana or a sweatband, long hair, the flowers, the peace sign, what is the thing that was the Mexican thing, the shawl, the poncho. She'd probably be wearing a poncho or something. Although it's summer, she might not be wearing that. But so that's where she came from. And again, the title, the lyrics of the song sketch out her background, and it's a good background. It gives a sense of her as this object of desire, not only for Marvin, the loser kid, but for Danny, the much younger boy who sort of idolizes her.